Welcome to our screencast series on building a social networking site using the ColdFusion on Wheels framework. In episode 7, we'll cover simple authentication rules with filters. Alright, now we're looking at our welcome screen in our social network, but there's a problem here. Anybody that accesses this URL right now can see this, and we want this to be hidden behind a login form. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So first off, I created a form at main login. It's just a regular login form. So here's the file. Nothing fancy here, and we've covered all these concepts before. And in main, I created the login action, which just sets a user variable that holds a person object that's blank. So nothing fancy there. So let's go ahead and create our rule that keeps people that are logged out of our social network until they've signed in. So I just opened controllers, controller.cfc, and this is the base controller. If you remember, all of our controllers are extending this file, so any methods we put in here will be included in all of the controllers. So what I'm going to do is create a method called checkLogin. And in this, we're going to do a fairly standard cf_if not struct key exists, and we'll check the session scope for a variable called user. And if that's not set, then let's redirect to controller equals main and action equals login. So anytime that this isn't found, let's redirect to main login. But this isn't going to run itself automatically, so we need to create what's called a filter, and you set this in a controller's init method. Because we want this accessible by all of our controllers, we're going to still put it in the parent controller's init here. So to do that, we'll call a function called filters, and it takes an argument called through, and we're going to pass it checkLogin. So on every request, we want it to run this checkLogin. So let's go ahead and run this. When you do that, you'll get a message similar to this, that the page isn't redirecting properly, because what happened was it redirected to main login, as you can see up here, but it kept trying to redirect to that even though it was already there, and that's not good. What we can do is pass an exception through an argument called accept, and we can pass this a list of actions that we don't want the filter to run on. So we don't want it to run on login. So if I redirect this main login, you'll see that it's not doing the endless loop. So if I run main home, it'll redirect us to main login. So all is good so far. But let's think about this for a second. We also don't want to lock the user out of user register. So let's add register. And also our login form is posting to an action called sign in, and the user's not signed in yet there, so let's also set that too. Okay, so now let's handle the form. So in main, let's create our sign in action. And what we're going to do is use a finder to find a record. So let's pass it to a variable, and we'll create an instance of person again, but this time let's call find one. And what this will do is find one record that meets whatever criteria we pass it. So it takes an argument called where, which is like the SQL where clause. We're basically writing a SQL statement here with less code, and the form passes an email and password. So let's pass email equals params.user.email and password equals params.user.password. Now, one thing that you might be concerned about is SQL injection, but what's great is that Wheels will automatically strip out these values that are being passed and put them in CF query param tags, so you don't have to write all those repetitive tags. So what happens if Wheels doesn't find a record? What it's going to do is return false. If it does find a record, because we're finding one, it's going to return an instance of the person model with the data loaded. So what we can do is, if it worked, so if it is an object, for now, let's set a variable session.user.id, and we'll set that to user.id because that was set by this finder. But what if it doesn't run? Let's go ahead and set a blank user again, and we'll set an error message, so flash insert error equals the email and password that you entered is not valid, and we'll redirect back to, or actually we'll call render page with an action of login. Now, one thing worth noting is that when we call render page, it's just going to call the view for this action. It's not going to call the login action itself, so it won't run this, and that's why we needed to explicitly call it up here. And let's go ahead and pass new email equals params.user.email. We could also pass a password, but I don't think we want to be sending that back to the browser because of security concerns and such. So let's go ahead and do a bad login. So I'll just do my email address, but I won't pass a password. So notice that we're on the main sign-in, but it called the view for login, and here's our message set in the flash, and the email address is still set in the form. So if this does work, let's go ahead and redirect. So let's redirect to controller equals main, action equals home. And my password is Wheels Rocks. So if I sign in, notice that we are now at main home and we're not locked out of the social network. So now that session.user should be set, and on subsequent loads, notice that it's not throwing me to the login. And let's go ahead and create a logout now. So what we'll do is on the layout, let's go to Views Layout. Let's create a link using link to, and it takes an argument called text. So let's do logout, and controller equals main, action equals logout, and in main we can create our logout action. All that we need to do here is another fairly standard struct delete, and let's delete session user, and we'll redirect to the login screen again. So now when I reload this, there's now a login link, and if I click that, it logs me out and sends it in. And let's try going to main home, and notice that it still redirected us to login, so it worked. For more information on filters in the ColdFusion on Wheels framework, visit cfwheels.org.